Aloha, and welcome to Live at the Legislature, where every week we sit down with members of the House of Representatives to talk about issues, priorities, legislation concerns moving through the halls of the state capitol. 10 days ago, 2 police officers were gunned down, a woman killed, and several homes burned to the ground in a quiet Waikiki neighborhood. The person responsible for all this mayhem had been struggling with mental illness for years, but the system apparently couldn't, or wouldn't, or didn't know how to help him. Joining us this morning is Representative Joy San Buenaventura. She is the chair of the House Human Services Committee, and she has been working on the issue of mental illness and working on legislation over the past year. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Carolyn.
So, can you, let's start off by having you, from your perspective, describe the state of our mental health system.
Right now, what I have found, because I'm also chair of homelessness, and the public still has this perception that despite us, the agencies, the government being able to house the homeless at a rate of 79%, the public still has a perception that it is actually growing. And that's because the chronic homeless that we see on the streets are usually mentally ill or alcoholic and or drug addicted. Mm-hmm. And it's a revolving door. And that's what I have found during the interim, was that our mental health system, as we treat the civilly mentally ill, is broken here in Hawaii.
How can we fix it?
Well, money and resources. Frankly, it's a multi-pronged approach. We have provided more monies for the Kaneohe State Mental Hospital to expand. However, those beds are solely for forensic, which means you have to commit a crime in order to be treated publicly. Mm-hmm. And that in itself is a crime. We should be able to have hospital beds for the mentally ill without having to commit a crime. And that's why we see this revolving door of the homeless, the mentally ill homeless who's on the street being reached out by police officers or clinicians, getting them into Queens, getting them at least treated, temporarily, but we have no mental health hospitals with which that they can stabilize. They are not in a state right after treatment to be able to join the regular homeless population into the multi-beds we have for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's, we have a revolving door. So we do not at this state right now have any public hospitals that house mentally ill patients for more than 3 or 4 days.
So in fact, you were telling me there's only one private facility?
Yes, and that's Kahimohala, okay, because right now Medicaid will not pay, and a lot of them, let's face it, are on MedQuest, which is Medicaid. Mm-hmm. Medicaid will not pay for treatment in a solely psychiatric facility. So we need to be able to have bed space in Kaneohe State Hospital for those who are civilly committed. And during the interim, we found a lot of bed space. We found on the Big Island, we found Old Hilo Hospital, Old Kona Hospital that can be retrofitted for some bed space. Here on Oahu, Leahi has a huge wing that's available, as well as Maluhia. So hopefully we can get those up and running. But that's only one of the problems. The other problem is we do not have the capacity in personnel. We need mental health, behavioral health, social workers at the very least. And really, if I had my wish list, we would have enough psychiatrists on the state. But we've had these vacancies for psychiatrists for like over a decade now, maybe decades. But so one of my bills is to hopefully grow our behavioral health social workers by offering them scholarships in exchange for working with Department of Human Services, in exchange for being outreach workers to the mentally ill.
Well, it sounds like it's a complex problem.
Yes.
It's an issue that has been brewing for years.
Yes.
And it affects everybody, not just the homeless people, it's just like regular folk.
Yes.
Who has a loved one who's mentally ill.
And have no place to put them. And people are telling me this all the time. I mean, they cannot handle them on their own. Because as shown in what happened a couple of weekends ago, it takes a special skill to treat the mentally ill. No amount of good intentions, if you are untrained, will be able to do that. And that's what happened. That's what occurred 2 weekends ago, was you have this people who are well-meaning, police officers who are normally well-trained for this kind of incident,
right.
and they didn't see this brewing. And so, like, one of my bills also is mental health first aid. Now, I know that the first responders are trained, but in this particular instance, he's had at least a dozen run-ins with the district court.
Right.
The court personnel were not trained to be able to see that here is somebody who is in need of mental health treatment. We either need in-court clinicians, or at least train the bailiffs or those in district court and family court where there are the potential for violence, to be able to spot the mentally ill and get them treated.
Well, that leads us to another question then. How coordinated are the various or private and public organizations and agencies that are tasked to deal with this? Are they talking to each other?
They are. I'm hoping that they do, but I've found that there is this disconnect. I mean, well, for instance, in looking for bed space, because we have put in money in Kaneohe State Mental Hospital to expand their bed space, I have found that basically the judiciary and the Department of Health running the mental health hospital, have this sort of disconnect in that the judges feel that they need to criminally commit the people that go in front of them, whereas nonviolent petty misdemeanors, nonviolent misdemeanors, those people who yell and scream on the street, who are just a disturbance or some minor property damage, those people can be civilly committed, and the law actually allows for that. However, there is this disconnect, and I'm hoping that there's this resolution, or at least hopefully this incident brings into the forefront the fact that they really do need to talk to each other, because if we have space available, we should be able to get them treated.
Well, it obviously, as I said earlier, is a complex issue and is not going to be resolved overnight. And there's a lot more to talk about, and hopefully maybe you can come back and we'll do it again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. And thank you to all of us for joining us at Live at the Ledge. We will see you again next week. Aloha.
Aloha.
What are you doing? We have to go. I'm gonna be late for work.
It's Tuesday morning. I gotta record live at the legislature on Alelo. Senate and House leadership discussing what's happening at the state capitol.
So just watch it on the news tonight. Come on, let's go.
Hey, this is like getting the news before it's news. If only I could get this remote to work.
There. Can we go now?
No DVR? No problem. Watch Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. on Channel 49.